Welcome to the podcast. We're just going to jump in here with some WordPress freelancer questions. First up, scaling the business. How can I transition from solo freelancing to running a larger WordPress consulting agency? So a lot of people think about this, like as they build their business, they start out, maybe they take one or two clients, customers, and they build it, they like it. Maybe then they start doing regular work. They have the word out on the street, they're doing it, and maybe they have a very successful solo freelance business. And I've certainly asked this myself. At one point I scaled up to about 10 people, and then I scaled down to 1, and now I have 3 people. And that's over the course of 15 years. I've been up and down in terms of the size of my team. And I think part of why I started that, why I built it up to 10 at that, that was about 8 years ago when we were at 10, is that I thought that was like the way to do it. I thought it was the next step for me in my professional growth. And I learned later that there's many ways to run a business, one of which is to scale it and grow it and maybe sell it at some point. Maybe not sell it. Maybe you just want to run a big agency that's well known in town. And I think that gets at the core of the question is, what do you need out of your business? What do you need out of your life? How does your business fit in with your current family life and goals and how much free time you have? In my case, part of the conflict for me when I scaled up to 10 was that the business required a lot more of my time. And, it was all managing people, building sales relationships, selling product, doing QA on stuff that my team was building. So my time investment went way up. I also had some of the most profitable years of my life in terms of money during that time, because we were making a lot of money. And but at the end of the day, for me, I didn't feel like it was a good fit, and I had to do it to realize that. I was busy raising my young children, and I wanted to be home and be present with my wife, and so I ended up scaling down. And it's been great, and it's felt like a much better fit for this phase of my life where I have 3 kids and lots of commitments, and so. If you want to, but let's get back to the question. How can I transition from solo freelancing to running a larger WordPress consulting agency? The first step is to hire someone. If you've never hired anyone to do anything, hire a freelancer to do part of a project. See how you like that. See what you learn. Read some books on outsourcing. I have a big long article on on tobycrines.com that I'll link to, explaining how freelancers can outsource to other freelancers, and it's like a step-by-step process based on my experience. You can do, lots of questions come up as you think about that. Do you want to hire someone in your town, in your state, in your country? Do you want to go abroad? If so, where do you go abroad? Do you want to go in your same time zone, opposite time zone? There's pros and cons and reasons for doing all these things. But the first step is just to try it. Hire somebody. If you don't know anybody that you want to hire, find a project and hire someone on Upwork to do it. Manage the project and see how you like that management process. And if you're like, wow, that felt great, do it again. And just try it and keep going. And at some point you'll figure out if you really like it or if you don't really like it. And that's, what you need to figure out. Second question, in the advanced WordPress techniques category, what are some advanced WordPress techniques that can set my services apart from the competition? I think the question is more about how to differentiate your WordPress consulting business or your WordPress development or design business from others in town. And invariably, there's at least 100 other businesses in town doing exactly the same thing you are, many of which are freelancers just like you, some of which are huge. They have 100 employees. So I actually don't think it's about setting yourself apart. I think you got to sell projects. And however you do it is fine. Once you sell a project, however you want to manage it is fine. It's not about setting your services apart. It's about just pleasing your customers and finding the customers you like and the customers that are a good fit for you personally and your skill set, and then scaling that piece. Figure out the customers you like, the customers that like you, and that sweet little middle ground, and just figure out how to get more of them. I never think about setting myself apart from the competition, except maybe in my marketing materials. But What I really value is just a human out there in the world, is a company that responds quickly and responds with skill, in terms of somebody that can do the job and it communicates well. That's pretty much what I'm looking for when I hire a plumber or whatever. And so I'll pay more for that. And that's how I've positioned the Mighty Mo in my consulting business, as that's how I've differentiated it. And I think that specifically has worked for me, but there's so many successful businesses out there that do it different ways and they differentiate different ways. But I don't even think people aren't shopping around for web people. They're just going out, finding someone, hiring them. And so it's not like you even have to differentiate. It's just kind of like, what do you want out of your business and how do you want to run your business? Next question. What strategies have proven most effective for acquiring high-value clients in the WordPress space? I think this is more about defining high-value clients. For me, when I started, I was going after high value. To me meant lots of money, big dollar projects. And I landed some big dollar projects, to be sure. I had one guy at one point say, "We don't care what you charge, just as long as you get the work done." And, that was a lot of money involved, and we got a lot of money, but it wasn't particularly fulfilling in terms of the work. But these days, for me, what high value to me is a customer who is maybe they need hosting, maybe they need a one-time thing. I'm really after like recurring revenue at this point. So someone who's willing to pay $100 a month is, to me, $100 a month requires very little of my time and effort over time. That's a higher value client than someone that might be willing to pay me a few $1,000s for a one-time thing and then I never hear from them again. I'd rather do that recurring stuff and get more of those. And so to me, those are higher value. But let's say you wanted to land a big dog. And by big dog, usually you're looking at an agency, looking to get hired by an agency. Or maybe you're very skilled on the sales end and you want to get in the room with some big corporations. They're both very different things. And actually, it's more about sales at this point than it is about WordPress. And I would say, like, to get in the room with, let's say, Target, it's a very different sales mentality than, say, to get in the room with an agency who has lots of work and can pay you. It's a very different skill set. Or to get in front of a small business owner who maybe has a big budget. These are very different sales audiences. And so I think it's more about, read some sales books and figure out what gels with you. Because personally, I don't like doing those big dollar corporate sales anymore. I much prefer the one-on-one small business owner, like, yeah, I can do this. How much does it cost? Here's what it's going to cost. Great. Give me your credit card. Great. Can we start tomorrow? Sure, we can. That's what I prefer. I'm working with an agency right now on a very big project. It's a WordPress, not a big project, it's a very big brand. It's a brand you've all heard of, and I'm just building a WordPress theme for them based on a design they produced. And so it's a big corporation, but the process is not gelling with me. There's lots of meetings where nothing gets done. Nobody delivers what they say they're going to deliver on time. And so I'm just kind of stuck doing nothing, twiddling my thumbs and asking the same questions over and over again. And maybe you like that, that's just not where I'm at. I'm like more action oriented at this point in my life. And so I much prefer the dealing with the buyers that can make stuff happen right away. Next question. How should I structure my pricing model to balance profitability with competitiveness? Well, you need to make money and make as much of it as you can within reason. You got to be, for me, this is me. I try to be very honest, very upfront, and I try to charge as much as I can possibly charge without the person on the other end of the line saying, screw this, you're way too expensive. And so that's really how I approach every sales conversation. I would say this, like, if you haven't done this before, do this. Double your rates, whatever you would charge at your next pitch meeting or whatever you're talking to someone, you normally would say, I'd charge X for that. Do the exact same sales pitch, but say, I'm going to charge 2X for this work. and see what they say. Maybe they'll say yes. And if they do, great. You just doubled your profitability. Maybe even more. Maybe if let's say you would have broken even, now you've infinitely escalated your profitability. You've made way more money than you would have. And so these pricing things, one thing I would say is each customer is very different. Some customers would pay you $5,000 for something. Some would pay you 20 for that exact same thing. And so one thing to keep in mind is never go in with assumptions about what people are willing to pay. And there's lots of great books, again, about sales. It's less about pricing and more about sales. Like you need to figure out how you present yourself matters. By the way, that first email you send them, the first phone call you answer, the first video call, however you present that is going to inform them about how much you're going to charge. So keep that in mind too, that there's a lot to this. And sometimes I have friends in the biz who suck at web design, but they sell huge projects because they're great salespeople. I've got a friend who owns an agency, a marketing agency, not a great agency, but they're doing their best. But he charges way more than I do and sells these projects. He's stolen one or two of my customers because he goes in and he knows how to make that sale. And, frankly, they're very happy with him because he knows how to make them happy. And it's not like he's delivering better work. He's delivering worse work. But he knows how to make people happy. And that's an important skill in this game. Next question. As a freelancer, how do I manage my time effectively between client work, business development, and personal growth? I think you got to be rigid. I think I actually don't look at it like a balancing act these days. I used to. I think you got to be present in all the situations. So if you're home with your family, put down the phone, put down the computer, have dinner with your family. If you're at work and you're on a client call, put your phone away. Have a conversation with the client. In terms of business development, do you like business development? I happen to like it. I like emailing people and meeting new people. So I tend to do a lot of business development and personal growth. What is that? Is that hobbies? What is personal growth? I don't know. But I try to just follow when I'm at home. I like to play guitar and I like to record stuff and do fancy things with my audio recorder. And so I try to do that just because I like it. I'm not saying like, I need a personal growth, but I think it contributes to who I am. I think there's like this tendency to say like, that work is encroaching on personal, and I just don't see it that way. If done, you gotta be present, and then it won't encroach because you'll have time, regardless of what you're doing and when, and you'll have time for it all. Next question: what are your tips for managing expectations and handling difficult client situations? I think a couple things. One, what I try to do, and I've been in this biz for 15 years, so I see stuff coming sometimes. I had a first-time engagement with a rather large nonprofit that you've all heard of, just an enormous organization. I don't know, maybe 50, I wanted to say 50,000 employees. They might have 50,000 employees. I don't know what they have, but thousands of employees, we'll say. And anytime I work with an organization like that, of that size, maybe they have a board, maybe there's like different stakeholders, I know it's going to be a lot of admin overhead, period, like contracts and, change orders and that sort of thing. So I build it into the price up front, and I don't tell them that. I just say, look, happy to do the work. Here's what it's going to cost. And I would start at 2x whatever I would charge a small business owner, just because it's going to eat up that, it's going to cost way more in terms of time and energy, blood and treasure. So start there. Start with, if you can see it's going to be a headache, charge more. You might also just, if you run into these situations a lot, charge more. You'll find a couple things. One, if you charge more, people respect you more. That's just a fact. And they'll respect your time more. They'll show you more respect in the interactions. When you push back, they'll respect it a little more. And that's part of the good thing not you go up this like what you charge to a point, and then you reach like if you can stay under this like layer of bureaucracy, and it's any big organization, let's say more than 40 people, like there starts to be like unneeded bureaucracy. And if you can get work under that and charge as much as you can, whatever you charge in there, you're going to have a much better odds of happier clients. And also, if you charge more for those, then you can go in, and a lot of times I'll charge more because I see it coming, and I'm just like, I charged in a way that I was like, whatever happens, I'm fine with. Like even if this project goes to hell, I'm fine with that because I charged enough to make me feel comfortable with that situation. So I usually just eat it. I do the work, and I don't get into the nitty gritty contract stuff all that much. If someone wants a change and it's not included, sometimes I'll just do it and just be like, well, that's why I charged what I charged and not something else. But let's say somebody comes to you, and let's say they're respectful about it. Like they're like, hey, you said you would do this. You didn't do that. And maybe you had a conversation with them explaining why you weren't going to do that. And it was very logical and reasonable, but they don't care. They want that. It's tough. What I try to do is lean into that paperwork and just say, what did we really agree to? A lot of times, I had a situation recently where this happened. It was with a big bureaucratic organization, and they had outlined a bunch of stuff in the contract that I couldn't deliver on because, like, if up front it looked like a good idea and looked like it made sense, but when we got there, I was like, this doesn't really make tech sense. Like, to build this is not going to work. And so when I brought that to them, I brought it in the context of some other things they were asking for that were outside of the contract. I was like, oh, do you remember when do you see how fancy this WordPress search box is working? And they're like, no, what do you mean? It looks like a normal search. And I'm like, well, I actually spent a day fixing that search. And so like in that case, we kind of negotiated on, something I had delivered and something that I promised. And, I over-delivered on this and under-delivered on that. And we came to an agreement. We're just like, okay, I see. We'll call it even. So you got to be flexible. There's a great book out there. It's called Getting to Yes, and there's one called Getting Past No. They're by the same authors. And it's all about negotiation at that point. You're just trying to, come out of it with as little scarring as possible. A lot of times you can get some big wins in there too. Not like big money or anything, although sometimes you could come in and say like, oh, you wanted that thing. It's a different scope than I thought. It's going to cost a little more. And maybe, there's all sorts of, everything's on the table. What are the emerging trends in WordPress development and design that I should be aware of? I mean, this Gutenberg thing is taking over some section of the WordPress community. I think Gutenberg's going to be, at some point, will be the go-to thing. Right now, I know barely any pro developers who use Gutenberg. It's just not as good as Elementor and Beaver Builder and all these other Divi, all the other options that are out there as builders. It's kind of like a beta or alpha Gutenberg is compared to these others. So I would say that's the biggest trend because the community has invested, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of hours, probably not that much, scores of thousands probably, in building this tool to replace the WYSIWYG editor. I would start there. Which project management tools do you recommend for WordPress projects to streamline workflow? I'm not someone who proselytizes a certain project management tool. I don't think it's important how you do it. Everybody and every organization is different. If you can get your project management done on a pad of paper with a pencil, great, do it. If your thing is checklists, do that. Personally, I like Basecamp, and Basecamp's like really expensive. It's $100 a month, and it doesn't do all that much, but I just really like how it's laid out, and how the UI encourages written conversation, which is great if you have a remote organization like I do. It promotes, conversational threads, whereas a lot of the other tools, like let's say Trello and all these others, they promote more disjointed conversation. Not even conversations, but just a bunch of stuff connecting and popping up. And so the UI is very different. That's why I use Basecamp. There are other tools that are free, and some people swear by those tools, and great, go for it. But whatever floats your boat, whatever feels good for you and your biz. How can I build a strong personal brand to enhance my credibility and attract more clients? I think people make this more complex than it needs to be. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to be known to have a lot of customers and a lot of success in business. I should say you don't need to be known by many. I think the best thing you could do as a freelancer to build more business is to speak in front of groups that have nothing to do with technology. Get in front of a knitters group, get in front of, I don't know, an insurance group, a bankers group, really anything that has nothing to do with WordPress, because they're going to need you the most, and they're going to be willing to pay for the work, because it's going to be really the prospect of them building a WordPress site or any website is like, they see it as like a mountain to climb. Whereas if you go and spoke to, like, I don't know, an Arduino group, they probably already all have blogs or websites, and so that's where I would probably start. And there's a million ways to do this. Again, there's a guy who wrote a book called Swimming with Sharks, and just a great sales book. And he talks about just all the ways he used to just engage buyers and try to get them to go with him rather than the competition. And it wasn't like he was building a brand, per se. He was just trying to, like, be number 2 on their list. So when the number 1 guy failed, he would be ready to pick up the pieces. But he relied on an old school Rolodex and mailed Christmas cards and did a lot of phone calls and that sort of thing. He told a story about how he knew one of his buyers, potential buyers. They weren't a client, but he knew they loved pro wrestling. And so he went and bought ringside tickets to the local, when the WWE came through town, and he bought ringside tickets. He goes, "Hey, would you like to go to this wrestling match with me?" And he knew the person wouldn't be able to say no. And so the person knew it too. They're like, "Gosh darn it, I have to go, and this guy's going to sell me on his thing." And but he's like, "Fine, I'll go do it." Anyway, the guy tells a story about 3 years later, he was the customer. The customer hired him. So, lots of ways to go there, but you got to choose your path and just kind of lean in. What are your tips for optimizing workflow and increasing efficiency in WordPress development? I think for me, you got to choose a tool set and stick with it. So for example, I use Beaver Builder for themes. I use Gravity Forms for forms. I use WordFence for security, things like that. So that saves time, and so I had a big customer recently was like, "Hey, we want you to use," what do they want, Elementor or something. I was like, yeah, I can do that. The project will cost, it'll take me 2 more weeks to learn this tool. So do you want the website done 2 weeks earlier or not? And they're like, just do it. Do it however you like to do it. So, cause that's more efficient, cause it's a tool I know. And, even if you're just, you don't need to use the most recent, newest tools. If you're fast at them and good at them, go for it. I know a guy who records audio, and he's the best music producer that I've met and interacted with, at least in town here. And he uses all old school stuff, old tapes, and he has this tape delay that has like literally a magnetic tape that goes around, and he controls the speed of it. But that works for him, and I think the same is in business, any business really. You don't have to, as long as you are fast, or you don't even need to be fast, as long as you are delivering on your promises to your customers. So let's say you tell your customer it's going to take a month, and it literally takes you a month. Great, who cares? Let's say you tell them a week, it takes them a week. Let's say it takes them to tell them a month, and it takes you 3 hours. Great, no, however you want to do it is fine. How do I balance the need for quick delivery while maintaining high quality work? Why do you have a need for quick delivery? I don't understand. The only need for quick delivery is someone pays me to deliver quicker, sure. but I try to build in lots of buffer on all my projects. Scotty from Star Trek, kind of famously used to over-exaggerate all the timelines, and that way he could save the day by getting stuff done sooner. And I think that's generally a good philosophy in business. You kind of like set low expectations and deliver in advance or on time, and people are very happy. And just to bring that Star Trek analogy one step further, Geordi LaForge did not overpromise. And so, maybe you're somebody who promises exactly the time it'll take. And then the high quality, high quality. What is high quality? It's going to be different for everybody. So I think you've got to figure out what you're personally comfortable with. And I always try to push on quality and what quality means to me, which is probably different from what it means to you. But I try to produce work I'm proud of, and that's to me what quality is. If I look at it and go, yeah, I'm proud of that work, then it's high enough quality, I think. Can you suggest effective ways to network and collaborate within the WordPress community? Yeah, you want to meet developers? Here in Minneapolis, we have WordPress Wednesday, which is a once-a-week co-working thing. Anybody can show up. You just have to show up. There's, WordPress meetups are great. You can plan, meetup.com. You can plan. You could collaborate online. You could go, like we have a Google group for our WordPress user group, and lots of people are on there. You can go to the Slack groups. There's lots of WordPress Slack groups. You can also collaborate. I've done a lot of contributing to WordPress.org and the BuddyPress project. So you can contribute in all sorts of ways. For example, WordPress.org is looking for people to write documentation. They're looking for people to troubleshoot bugs. They're looking for people to draw, do design work. Tons of ways to contribute. Just kind of have to figure out what you want to do and go find the go figure out how to do it. What strategies do you use to prevent or manage scope creep in WordPress projects? I try to put myself in situations where scope creep isn't a thing. And the only way I know how to do that is to build trusting partnerships and relationships with people where, if I come to them and I'm like, hey, this thing that you're asking for is not going to fit in the scope we talked about. And a lot of times, by the way, I don't have like contracts where everything's written out. Usually my contracts include very little high-level stuff, and my invoice is one line, X amount of dollars for the work outlined in the contract. And the contract really doesn't have a lot of details. And the reason I don't put a lot of details in there is because I want to have that back and forth where, people always have ideas, and they say like, hey, can you do this thing that I just saw on this other website? I'm sorry, I should have thought of it 3 months ago. And usually it's like, yeah, let's take a look. And I'd rather do that than be like really firm and in both ways, because sometimes I push back too, and I'm like, turns out this WooCommerce plugin doesn't do what we thought it would do. And that happens regularly. And so, you got to build in your budget, in your bid, and, the money amount needs to be enough to cover most of the contingencies or all the contingencies. And so you got to charge more if you're feeling like scope creep isn't a thing. And you got to have better relationships with your customers. What are the key factors? What are the key factors in ensuring sustainable growth for a WordPress freelance business? Key factors for sustainable growth, not just growth. Well, yeah, sustainable. That's the question. Because you can, at one point I grew unsustainably. And we had a lot of, success, made a lot of money, but like it was unsustainable. And the reason it was unsustainable was because I was just not in a place where I could sustain the sales that were required to keep building. Also growth. Why grow? Why, what is growth? Why do you need to grow? I always wonder that. Like, I'm looking, what I always aim for is like, a little bit of growth year over year without a lot of bumps. I don't want a bunch of people to leave and a bunch of people do. And the only way I've figured out how to do that is to have a lot of recurring monthly revenue that kind of keeps things rather steady. A lot of people paying relatively little, and that keeps the floor pretty high. And then, on the top I have these ups and downs, but it's because of the monthly stuff, it never dips below that monthly floor. And I'm always trying to, particularly for me, I'm always trying to onboard more monthly recurring revenue because that raises that floor with every one of those. Should I diversify my WordPress services? And if so, what areas should I consider branching into? I don't know. Are you curious about AI? Are you curious about WordPress speed? Are you curious about accessibility? There's tons and tons of money right now sitting on the table today waiting to be claimed for accessibility pros. Like if you are willing to do that work and you're willing to accept that liability, there is, more money than I think has ever has existed in the WordPress space since like 12 years ago when everyone was building their first website. So all those first websites have been built. This is like, what do you call it? Green pastures, blue ocean. This accessibility thing right now today, if you just wanted to make money, jump on it. But there's so many things you could do. I have one friend built a Shopify plugin for WordPress that he sells. Another friend built a Beaver Builder add-on that she sells. And so there's lots of ways to make more money and diversify. One of the things that we are doing, now this is weird because really what's diversifying really? Like you're just trying to get more money from more people. And so one thing I realized is that the Mighty Mo, my business, has to date over 15 years just advertised in Minneapolis and St. Paul, like just this little area, sometimes Minnesota. And we've done all our SEO for that. We've totally targeted that and we've done really well. But I'm like, there's like many other major cities. In fact, there are 18 cities in the United States that are bigger than Minneapolis. And so I was like, what if we diversified that way, offered the exact same set of services, but to a different geography, different to Chicago, to San Francisco, to LA, to Bozeman, Montana, because we have skills in marketing locally, but so far we've only applied those here in the Twin Cities. And so lots of ways to think about diversity in services. And if, again, I think you got to bring it back to how much money, it's about money. Most of these questions are about money. And so there's many ways to make money, many honest and ethical ways to make money within the WordPress space and beyond. And I think when anytime how do I make money question comes up, I'm like, you got to think about sales. This is about leads and selling. And what selling is getting their credit card on file, And so like, if I were to encourage you to read books and be like, hey, if you really want to make money, read sales books and negotiation books. That's probably where I would start. So that's what we got today. That's the entirety of this podcast. Leave questions. Let me know if you have ideas for next time. But thanks. We'll talk to you soon.